My question is about the Bashams. And did they ever have heat in the OVW locker room? Or do you have any fond stories about them?
Oh, my God. Well, I've plenty of fond stories. No, they not completely the opposite. Not only did they not have heat, but they were both our locker room leaders to some extent, along with Nick Dinsmore and Rob Conway. Doug Basham was Danny Davis's nephew. He was Danny's first student when Danny opened up OVW as just a small wrestling school here in Louisville back in the early 90s. And then came Nick Dinsmore, and then came Rob Conway, and then came Danny Basham, who we called and was known as the Damager. And I think Doug he was always in tremendous physical condition. He reminded me so much of Brad Armstrong and just his style and how smooth he was and what a tremendous worker he was. And, when Damager came along, he was 19 years old when he went to his first wrestling class at OVW, and 6 months later, he was the OVW champion. He was a prodigy. You couldn't blow him up. His cardio was insane. He didn't have a great, bodybuilding body, but he was in great shape. He could cut a better promo. Doug was not the promo that Danny was. And really, I based, because those were my 4 OVW originals, and they were here when we got the WWE developmental deal, WWF developmental deal. I came down from Stamford to book and announce for Danny and part owner of the promotion. Those were the 4 go-to guys. They were the best talents we had. They were the best talents we had even when WWF started sending us contract guys, because them we mostly had to train from scratch. And so Doug and Dano and Rob and Nick really, that first group of graduates, John Cena, Randy Orton, Batista, Brock, Shelton, they all got on the job training not only by going to OVW, but by working programs with those 4 OVW originals. And I had then finally put Doug and Dano together as a tag team because Doug was a heel. He was not here wrestling for OVW when I first started because he had a good job at Ford and he worked the shift that prevented him from making any of the shows. And I lusted after him getting his shift changed or doing something. And finally he did. And I was able to bring Doug in as the Machine under a mask. And then slowly over a period of a year or so, we revealed that it was Danny's nephew, Doug Basham, and that he had been promised a piece of the company. And he felt like that his uncle had reneged on that promise, and there was heat, and he was going to take over the company. And Damager was one of the top baby faces, and the people loved him, and his promo was just unlike anybody else's. And like I said, he could go in the ring, and they battled against each other. And then finally Damager turned heel, and they became partners in the Revolution. And they were, in my opinion, at that time, this was 2001-ish, the best heel tag team in wrestling. They were just tremendous together. They meshed perfect. They looked good, and they drew money for us. And so I pushed them as a team, and I also pushed them to the WWF. Screamed, why are you not using these guys? Look at their tapes. Look at how well they perform. They outperform all these people that you sign up and send down here. We got to train. Hell, they're training most of them. And to no avail, deaf ears. And finally, the summer that we were getting ready for our Six Flags season, I think it was probably 2004, I decided to switch Danny back, babyface, and turn them on each other so that they could carry the load for our Six Flags shows all through the summer, where they would meet in singles matches and they would take different partners and face each other, etc. And that's when, with no notice to me, not only did they put them together on SmackDown as brothers, but they had Doug Basham shave his head in the locker room so they could see what he looked like bald, since Danny was bald. And they wanted them to be brothers. And all of a sudden, Doug walks into an OVW TV taping one day. Instead of this long, dark hair that he wet and had a look to him and it would fly when he'd take these big bumps, he looked like a 40-year-old truck driver. And I called John Laurinaitis up and screamed at him on his voicemail because he knew not to answer the phone whenever I called him on Wednesday, because that meant that his staff of comedy writers had fucked me again somehow on my program down here. So we concocted a story that basically indicated that John Laurinaitis was fucking around with Nikita, who was the valet of Doug Basham, And as a result, they had forced the Damager to become on national TV Doug Basham's brother, trying to run him out of wrestling and make him quit. But Damager told the people that he would always be the Damager in OVW, and he was going to try to fuck up Doug Basham. And somehow all that summer we drew the biggest crowds we had ever drawn in OVW to that point to see the Bashams fight it out, because the people were so incensed at the way that all of their favorites would get treated whenever they'd appear on WWF television. When they'd sabotage Nick Dinsmore and made him a fucking, what do they call him? A special. They made him a retard's what they made him. And I'm not saying that derogatory about people with mental or physical defects. I'm saying it about the stupid gimmick they gave him. And they destroyed Matt Morgan. And we actually had our fans, our OVW fans, not only live at the arenas, but writing us letters back then when people actually still did that thing, complaining about the way that the WWF treated their favorite wrestlers and how they were perceived as goofs and idiots on those TV programs. So to the question, no, they not only never had any heat in the locker room, but they were two of the most respected guys here and two of the best performers, and they drew money, and I'm talking crowds in the thousands at Six Flags. And sellouts every week at TV, 500 people being turned away from the Davis Arena, people lining up at 2 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon to make sure that they got in just to see the continuing saga of the Revolution and Doug Basham versus the Damager. And then they took them up there and they made them brothers, and they put that awful piece of shit Linda Miles as Shaniqua with them and killed both their careers to the point where neither one of them wrestles now. Danny quit pretty much as soon as he got out of there. Doug tried for a little while, but his heart wasn't in it. And he's like so many of the other trainees that we had. As soon as they got their dream job with the WWF, found out what it was like, they came back home, packed up their boots and their tights, and found other lines of work.
Well, on that uplifting note, let's go to the next one.